Hey everyone, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about... Alright, so we've been hearing a lot recently about people who might need to be humbled, people whose egos are getting the best of them, people having a big ego. And there's so much to unpack there, and there's so much to be said about all these different things, and that's what I wanted to get into today. So before we get started, my name is Roshni. Before we get started, my name is Roshni. This channel is called Beti Garup, and it's dedicated to talking about self-care, self-work, and self-worth. And let's just jump into this video. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the idea that you need to understand what the ego is and everything that it stands for, and an important part of understanding that is kind of looking at the full picture. So there was a psychologist named Carl Jung a while ago. He came up with the idea of the collective unconscious and a lot of major ideas that we still talk about today in psychology. And this kind of area of psychology is named Jungian psychology after Carl Jung, and this whole idea is kind of born in regards to explaining the self versus the ego. So when you think about, so this kind of lives in the greater world of psychoanalysis. So a lot of people, when they think of psychology, they think of Freud and the ego and all of that stuff, and that's still very much true, but Freud kind of falls more under the umbrella of psychoanalysis, and psychologists today use a lot of other practices in addition to just psychoanalysis, so those two aren't necessarily the same thing. However, Freud basically had the idea, which you may have heard of, the ego, the superego, and the id. So I can make a whole other video on that, but it's kind of along the same lines of understanding how we function in society, understanding what motivates us, what makes decisions, what helps us make decisions, and what is particularly interesting is... So along the same lines of kind of describing, what motivates us, what encourages us, what helps us make decisions, it's another way of looking at that. So instead of the ego, the superego, and the id, Jung came up with the idea of the self versus the ego as kind of the two parts of who we are. So the self is peaceful, it's more patient, it's more calm, it's something that is more the core part of you, something that doesn't quite change as much. And the ego is more about, the superficial parts of you, the parts of you that has to fit into society, parts of you that are maybe changing or keeping up with what you see around you, the parts of you that care about... the parts of you that care about, who you are and how you portray yourself and how other people see you. So there's good and bad sides to both. I wouldn't say that the ego needs to be demonized or anything like that, but it definitely does have things that are not so great about it, and so that's what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to keep using this graphic that I made a while ago to kind of reference these two sides of it and to kind of help compare and contrast. So let's just get into it. So, you come here. Oh, my baby. Alright, so the first thing is the ego. So, the ego is kind of always looking for validation, right? It is the part of ourselves that helps us survive in society, and that's kind of what Freud talked about as well. He kind of combined the ego and the superego, and that was, what you are supposed to do, what we're taught to do, what's acceptable. And so, all of us are probably a little bit weird. We all did weird things as kids. We all, some of us liked playing around in nature more. Some of us liked, dressing up and kind of playing with their mom's clothes or whatever it might be. So there's lots of things that we just kind of naturally do or that we're curious about as kids. And a lot of that, society tells us, like, whether that's right or wrong, or it tells us whether that's weird or acceptable or encouraged. And obviously a lot of that has to do with where you grow up and nurture and all of that. But these are important factors in who we end up becoming. What we're taught is okay, what we're taught is acceptable. And so our ego ends up kind of taking all of the value from society. It looks at, what is valuable in society and how can I be that? How can I portray that? So when your ego is kind of out of check and you're not really doing things for a certain reason, you're just doing things to feed your ego or to feed that idea of what you want in life, So what you need to know about your ego is that it does help you survive in society. It is really important in a lot of ways in order to keep you progressing, keep you moving towards your goals, keep you not doing like crazy random things that are inappropriate. So that's all obviously really important and really good. But at the same time, it can get really carried away. It can kind of make your entire importance as a human being based on what other people think of you. It's looking for attention. It's looking for that gratification. It's looking for other people to validate it all the time. And so that can also be really damaging, especially in the world of social media and Instagram and things like that. Obviously those things weren't always around. So now that we can actually fulfill that need for gratification all the time, you can really live with your mind in kind of that ego place. Like, ego is what makes you want to like face tune the absolute crap out of your pictures. You know what I mean? Ego is what makes you want to crop other people out, or ego is what makes you want to not talk to anyone that has less followers than you. All these things, there could be multiple reasons for things like that. A lot of it does come out of protecting yourself, but that's the same thing with the ego. It's there to protect you, but it's also there to kind of make you seem a little bit better, make you seem like you have an edge up. It's all about protecting that really vulnerable part of you. And it's interesting because all of that kind of does revolve around self-worth. And that's why I feel like it's so, so important to talk about self-worth, because everything that we're doing in some way or another is either to get that idea of self-worth, to maintain that idea of self-worth, to convince ourselves that we have worth, to convince other people to worthy us. So I feel like that is such a central core reason for why we are motivated to do things, why we do the things we do or talk to the people that we talk to. There's always a reason for it, and obviously I think the ego is a huge part of that. So it's it's loud, it's constantly, like I said, asking for attention. It's kind of it's more short term. It's looking for, what can I do now? What can I do to save face now? It's not in it for the long haul. It's not there to, work really hard and take things slowly and whatever. It's there to grow quick, to grow fast, to get as much attention as possible, to be the best as possible, as fast as possible. Those are kinds of the things that the ego wants you to do. And when it comes to the self is a lot more patient. It's a lot more core to who you are. There are parts of yourself and parts of your personality that, are evident to your parents when you're really, really young, when you're a toddler, when you're born, that kind of stay with you until you're an older person, whether that's generosity, it's patience, it's, just kindness, or, always looking out for other people. There can be so many things. Even if it's just being really detail oriented, it doesn't have to be this grand gesture type of thing, but there's parts of your personality that have just been there forever. It's just who you really are at your core, and money isn't going to change that. Friends aren't going to change that. Where you live isn't going to change that, but it's just who you are. And it's also the part of yourself that's really patient, that wants to take its time with things, that wants to do things the right way in the right time. It's really not loud. It's not asking for attention. It's quiet. It's subdued. It's graceful. It's just who you are when no one is looking. And there's some really great parts of all of us deep down. It's just about how much you give it light and how much you give it attention and how much you feed those hobbies and those sides of yourself. So that's a little bit about just what they are at their core. Like I said, yourself is a lot more simple. It's a lot more patient. It's just more positive. It's kind of your higher being. It's what helps you stay connected to other people. We all kind of feel that sense of connection, maybe not all the time, but in certain moments, I'm sure a lot of us have felt it, where we either feel like there's someone that we absolutely love that's across the world, and yet, despite the amount of distance between you, know exactly what they're going through. If they're having a bad day. That kind of connectivity, whether it's to another person, whether it's it's to a higher being, whether it's to someone that may have passed on, we kind of feel that connection to something bigger. And it doesn't mean that you have to be religious or spiritual. You just feel, connected to other humans, to other life, to animals maybe. There's that part of you that really feels alive and awake and just connected and like you're thriving, and that's where your self is. That's where your self comes from. So I hope that this kind of clarified it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. But the reason why this is so important is that there is just so much to unpack here. It's important because there's kind of two sides to every person, and we can identify with more one side than the other. A lot of people will say, I'm just here for there's a lot of people that will identify with their trauma bonds. So basically, where they grew up or where they experienced a lot of trauma, the kind of social environment where they experienced trauma, or the types of people that they were around when they experienced that trauma. A lot of those things, even though we're so absolutely traumatized by it, it can force a trauma bond. And I feel like that's a whole other topic. So I can talk about that in detail later on as well. But it's kind of the idea that you becomes like that part of you is such an important part of your life. Like one day you were living your life as normal, and then this huge traumatic thing happened to you, and because of that, that ingrained a lot of your personality, that ingrained a lot of your fears, that just kind of became synonymous with your identity, with what you were going through. It encompassed everything in your life at that moment, and because of those traumatic things that a lot of people face, they end up not being able to break away from those social environments, from the people around them, from the things that happen to them in that traumatic state, because of the fact that it becomes their identity, right? It becomes who they are. And that's obviously really dangerous and really harmful, and it can kind of cause people to see themselves in a certain way, or to self-sabotage, or to treat themselves badly because they feel like they are bad, or they caused something to happen, or that they deserved it. Things like that can really mess with your self-esteem. It can really mess with your identity, and that's obviously not what any of us want. It's not the goal. But if you're in that mindset, or even if you've just really gotten into your ego, maybe you had a great couple of years, maybe your career took off, maybe, you got a lot of followers online. It could be anything, whatever happened that really built or filled your ego. That can also be a place where you just are choosing to kind of plant your roots. And anytime you plant your roots in that kind of ego mindset, whether it's out of pain or whether it's just out of kind of that dopamine impulsive rush, both of those things can really, really damage you, because you're not giving life to that deeper self, to that true higher part of you that exists. But the good news is that even though you've planted your roots in that one side of you that maybe isn't the greatest, or maybe doesn't have the most going for it, it's still possible to get in touch with that other part of you, because it's been there all along. And that's the best news. You can say, oh, I'm just a party person. Oh, I'm just not meant to be sober. I'm not meant to be around, long-term relationships. I'm not meant to be around healthy people who are not nocturnal. You can say so many things about yourself, and I've said a lot of those things about myself too. I used to be a party person. I used to be, just constantly going from one party to the next, or constantly from one friend group to not to the next, but just hopping between lots of different friends, lots of different environments. I had my entire identity and my entire personality ingrained in that. So I get how scary it can feel to leave that and kind of jump away from that and move on to something new. But it's possible, and at the end of the day, your life won't really even look that different, because it's still going to be you. You're just going to be a healthier version of yourself. So the good news is that, if you do want to get in touch with that more patient part of yourself, that more that stronger part of yourself, that stable part of yourself, you still can. You always can make that choice, and you can always start feeding that side of yourself. And one of the best ways that I've actually done this is the rule of do's and don'ts. So creating rules for yourself. And I'm going to put in a little bit of B-roll here of this sheet where I actually did this, and I got that idea. I got this sheet from like a Tony Robbins documentary. He didn't explain it, but I saw people working on it. So I was like, ooh, I'm going to take that and I'm going to kind of make it my own and make a little sheet for myself. And so I did that. It's on my fridge. I see it every single day. And a lot of these rules have really made a fundamental difference in my life. Like, for example, saying the idea that my growth is painful, like that's something that I'm putting on the do not think list, on the don't rule list, because that's not what I want to feel, but I know that I felt that way so much. I felt like being a good person is hard. Being a better person is painful. It's hard to grow up. It's hard to face the crap that you've done in your life, but you've got to do that at some point, because this is your time to this is your renaissance, this is your time to shift things around and change things and be a better person. And if you don't take that time right now, if you don't step up for yourself and give yourself that permission, it's never going to happen, and more time is going to go by, and you're going to feel more and more sorry for yourself, and your life is going to become like this entire pity party where you're self-sabotaging, you're talking yourself down from the things you really want to do. You're ignoring your better judgment, and you're just kind of living in this mental squalor that's not healthy for anyone. So you have to be able to give yourself that permission, give yourself that chance, face the fact, face your past, and just say, this is what it is. This is what my life has come to, and this is what it's become right now. But you know what? I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I'm still here to face it. This is what, again, talking about that connectivity, this is what has been given to me as my life's work. These are the challenges of my particular life. This is what I'm going to face, and this is what I've been dealt with. This is how I'm going to be the absolute best I can be, and use that, to my advantage, to grow from and learn from and create this beautiful life from, because I have these challenges, but I know deep down that I am a stronger person. I know that I'm a person that can be patient because I'm doing the right thing. If you're doing the right thing, then you don't have to rush. You can always find ways to be smarter and to grow and things like that, especially when it comes to social media or your business or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice all of your morals. It doesn't mean that you have to give every last bit of your truth or every last bit of yourself up. A lot of these things, it's possible to do it, but you just have to choose to do that with integrity. And that's where these rules come into play. You have to decide what your personal rules are. You have to decide what your personal struggles are. Whether your rules have to do with being sober, whether it has to do with not contacting certain people or staying in contact with other people, whether it's, choosing to move and get away from the entire city that you've been in, making all these bad decisions in. Whatever it is, you have to decide what those rules are for you. And, making that piece of paper didn't change my life. It wasn't like, oh my God, I woke up in a totally new life that next day. No, but I realized what some of my problems were. I sat down and I said, no, this is my bullshit. This is my crap that I need to cut. This is my downsides. These are the bad parts of me that I need to fix. And that's okay. That genuine acceptance, when you can accept the good and the bad parts of yourself, that is the most whole you will ever feel, because we will always have bad parts of ourselves. We will always have parts that we need to work on, that we need to make better. We always will have edges that we need to soften, and traumas that we need to heal, and things that we can grow upon. But facing that is the hardest freaking part. And being able to look at yourself and say, this is crap that I've been doing over and over again. This is me being my own mother. This is me being my own parent, and saying, you need to stop. You need to love yourself enough to not do that, to not talk to that person, to stay away from those things, to not go to those parties, whatever you need to do to kind of circle back and be a better person. And what you need to do after deciding these rules is be intentional about it. You can say, okay, these are my general rules. These are, the big things and the small things and all the things I want to do and avoid, etc. But then what does that look like in my day-to-day life? So in your day-to-day life, look at, does that mean not talking to a certain person? Does that mean blocking them on all social media? Does that mean reaching out to someone that you love and genuinely apologizing? Does it mean writing a letter? Does it mean, moving, like I said earlier? It could be anything, but break your rules down into some next steps of the next few weeks. And, if it's a bunch of things you have to do, grab your calendar, your Google Calendar, or grab your planner, whatever you use, your bullet journal, and write it down. Plan it out. Say on, this Monday, I'm going to call this person. The next day, I'm going to do this. And, you can take your time with it. You can do one important thing, one rule that you set for yourself that's an actual task every week, so that you have time to prepare, you have time to deal with it, you have time to process through it, because what you're doing here is huge and it needs a lot of time and it needs a lot of intention and effort and just reasoning behind it all. You know what I mean? So I don't expect you to take this lightly. I don't expect this to happen in a day or in a week. It's going to take a long time. It might take a lifetime. It might take years. But it's all this process of just getting the ball rolling that's the hardest part. So after you've set those rules, you can set out your tasks and you can schedule them out for the next month. So whether it's 3 tasks that you schedule out, whether it's 1 task per week for a month that you have, find a way and sit down and make that list today. Make those items today and hold yourself accountable. Tell one friend or post it on your story and say, I have this one thing I need to do. Hold me accountable. Talk to your followers or your friends or your mom or whoever is there in your life that can hold you accountable to doing that one positive thing. And if you can't find that, then, there's tons of apps out there that hold you accountable or that keep you productive. Set this goal as a productive item that you need to get done in one of those apps, and use an app or a gaming system to help you stay accountable to that. Even on Reddit, there's groups that will help you do this. So there's a way, there's someone that you can find out there, or some sort of app or something that will help you stay accountable. So that's another important reason. And the last thing is using affirmations. I talk about affirmations so much, and honestly, they are so helpful. I've stopped doing them. I've done them consistently every single day. I've gone through such a journey with doing affirmations, and honestly, I can genuinely tell you that the days that I do them are so much better, are so much more intentional. I'm able to kind of slow down my thoughts. I'm able to be more mindful. I'm not so rushed, and I truly think that it's because I'm checking in with that higher self. I'm feeding myself something healthy and positive that my deeper self can truly work on and digest and focus on, and that is what my self needs. That's what that higher part of me is truly looking for and desiring. So taking affirmations and saying, say one of your rules is, I'll use one of mine for example. So looking at my thing, it's I give myself permission to stand out. So standing out was terrifying to me. I always wanted to blend in. I never did because of my skin and my height and all the things that are different about me. And so, all I really wanted was just to blend in and not be seen and not be noticed. And, being on YouTube and putting myself out there on this different platform and all these different things that I've been doing with my business and with my YouTube channel have forced me to really put myself out there and to really make myself stand out. And I've been having to look at standing out as this unique, amazing thing instead of this bad, dangerous thing that I saw before, that I thought of it as before when I was younger. And so that in itself has been a huge journey of giving myself permission to get attention, to keep attention on me, to want attention, to want to stand out. All of those things were really heavy things for me to deal with, but I've been able to give myself permission to do that. And so one of the ways, that I can turn that into an affirmation is saying, I give myself permission to show up. I show up. I am present in my day-to-day life. I bring my full self to my day-to-day life. I bring my higher self to my life. I bring, my higher self to my everyday. I bring my whole self to each of my tasks. There's so many different ways to bring those things into what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And the only other thing with affirmations that I want to mention here is just to make them not positive. So don't make affirmations about your don'ts or what you fear or what you don't want or what you want to stop doing. Just make affirmations on things that aren't there yet, but on what you want to be true. So, I stand out. I love attention. I love holding other people's attention. I am not, things like that, rather than saying I am not afraid of attention, because all those negatives and using words like afraid or fear, all those things kind of bring that into reality. Your brain doesn't process negatives in that energy kind of way, and so you want to attract and you want to focus on the positive and what you don't have, rather than making your mind focus on the sentences that are negative of what you don't have or what you want to avoid, if that makes sense. So I hope that this video really helped you. I hope that these 3 steps are steps that you will actually try. So let me know in the comments below if you tried them, and so I hope that this video is helpful to you. Your ego does have some good things in it. Like I said, just to wrap up, your ego does have some really solid parts of it. There are some good sides to your ego, like, you know, keeping you moving forward, keeping you doing not crazy things in society or on a day-to-day basis, but at the same time, we all have that deeper part of ourselves that wants to be seen, that wants to be loved, that wants to love others, and that wants to do things for others. But we can spend so much time living in our ego that side gets overlooked. And honestly, it's about whichever side you feed is the one that comes out. You know, when you see those people and they're just calm and collected, nothing ever really makes them mad, they're just chilling, they're enjoying life, they're always happy. Those are the kinds of people that are putting their higher self forward. Those are the people that are focusing on, you know, what they want their higher self to be and allowing that to really come through and stay forward, and they're feeding that part of themselves instead of focusing on, you know, just how you look and on just how many likes you get and on how many followers your friends have, etc. Because those are all important in some ways, but for the most part, you know, they're all kind of shallow, they're all kind of superficial. That's not the kind of thing that's going to keep you warm at night, if you know what I mean. So you know, you really have to learn how to balance those 2 things. And again, it's really hard, especially if you're a content creator or someone that works in social media or on YouTube. And if you relate to that, or if that's you, then go check out my video on entrepreneurs and depressing things that all YouTubers and content creators go through. I also talk about some solutions in that video. So if you relate to that, because that's a whole other world and a whole other topic on its own, please check out that video. I hope that you enjoyed this one so much. If you did, drop a like and a subscribe down below. I wish you all the best and happy healing. Thanks for watching.